and welcome to episode 8 of the Martial Art Mastery Podcast. I am your host, Grandmaster Johnson Field of Cobourg Taekwondo, and we got a super special guest today. We have Grandmaster Chris Natzke, who's actually one of my mentors. He's an 8th son in Taekwondo, 8th son in the Superfoot System, former U.S. national Taekwondo champion in sparring, as well as motivational speaker, speaker for corporations, works with all kinds of big corporations, helping their leaders take their businesses to the next level, former school owner, former martial arts consultant. I can go on, but I'm gonna let Chris tell his story. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. So, you and I have known each other for about 3 years now, which is
Mhm.
kind of funny because we met through the Superfoot System, and then
Okay.
when we actually got to meet in person, we actually found out we had a bunch of mutual friends. And it was my master in Taekwondo, Veronica DeSanto, and that's when
Yes.
we really hit it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, Veronica and I weren't on the exact team, but we both were part of the Ultimate Black Belt test. So I don't know. I was on the first team. She may have been on the second or third, but when we did an eco challenge back in the day, this was a, a program that Tom Callos ran for many years. We had an eco challenge, I believe, in Hawaii. I think that's where I
Yeah,
got to know her the best. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of cool how like the martial arts world really is kind of small when you look at it. Like everybody seems to know everybody, or at least one removed from
That's
everybody,
right.
right?
That's right.
Like you and I can say that we're both one removed from knowing Bruce Lee, for example,
Sure.
through
Yeah.
Grandmaster Bill Wallace, or I'm one removed from knowing Chuck Norris through Bill Wallace or Veronica DeSantos. And
Yeah.
you probably met Chuck Norris, probably, but
I have.
yeah,
I have.
it's just how the world. So you've been doing Taekwondo for how long? Or martial arts in general?
This is my 51st year.
Which is that's
So I
insane.
started back in 1973.
That's just insane. That's like a lifetime of martial art. So how did you did you start out with Taekwondo or did you start a lot of people end up starting another martial art and then finding the one that suits them. Was Taekwondo that one that you started with and stuck with or how did that come about?
As a matter of fact, it was. And back in the old dark ages when I started, um, it was mostly known as Korean karate. So when I went to my first class, which was actually at a community center at my in my hometown, 30 miles 30 miles west of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was inspired because the TV show Kung Fu was on at that time. So I just wanted to learn something. And so I went to class for the first time. It was called Korean karate. And I fell in love instantly. It was like I felt I came home. And then later on, it almost felt as like that's when the name Taekwondo started to become in vogue. But again, it was Korean karate when I started.
So what was it? What was it about Taekwondo that just like instantly made you fall in love with it?
Well, it was martial arts in general because it wasn't as if I had other martial arts I was comparing it to. You have to think about this is in the early 1970s. There wasn't a martial arts school on every corner like at least there is in the United States. In fact, in order for me to train with my eventual master instructor, I had to drive 30 miles one way just to train with him. Um, so there really wasn't much of a comparison. I mean, karate, kung fu was basically the vernacular of that time is the generic term. But I could have fallen into a Shotokan school or a Kempo school or whatever. I just became enamored with martial arts and being able to move the body in the ways that we were doing it.
Yeah, that's actually very similar to my background or starting because I guess my generation would have been Ninja Turtle, or just before that would have been the Karate Kid. My generation was Ninja Turtle, but before I really got into Taekwondo, it was actually Kung Fu: The Legend Continues. So the next generation of that, and that was filmed up here in Toronto, which is like an
Oh,
hour
right, right.
from me. But meanwhile, the show was supposed to be based in San Francisco, but it's literally only an hour from me
Oh,
where
I
that
didn't
was
know that.
filmed.
That's funny.
And so that was really I didn't even know Taekwondo existed. Like not
Sure.
while I was like 14, 15. It was like Kung Fu or karate. And mainly
Right.
watching Kung Fu, it was
Yeah.
that and then we found Taekwondo school. So that's kind of funny how our,
Well, it's interesting too. I tell this story of when I started when I was 10 years old, and I was about 10 or 11. I've been training a year, maybe less. And I used to practice all the time around home. And I just instinctively, in fact, it's so funny because it's still a part of my training today, would do a lot of slow kicking around the house. I'd grab onto a chair and I'd lift my leg and I'd practice my kicking. And one time I overheard my mom speaking to her friends, and they said, "What's this Taekwondo that your son is doing?" And she said, "Oh, Taekwondo. It's like ballet, but it's faster." And as an 11-year-old, that's not the coolest thing you want your mom to say, although I have high regard for people who do ballet. They're amazing, but that was her perception because that's all she saw me do was, walking around the house with my leg up in the air. So
And then, well, I guess it's similar. Like Taekwondo or any traditional martial arts, Taekwondo, karate, kung fu, there's a lot of forms or pumses or katas or some Chinese word for it. But like, there's a lot of routine that could be interpreted to some people as very dance-like, right? We know better, but yeah, no, that's actually, I think that's a fair analogy, especially back in the day. Yeah, so okay, so now you started your Taekwondo journey, and then can you tell me a little bit about the early days of your training and maybe even leading up and going through your first black belt testing?
yeah. So as I mentioned, I started with a small community center program in my little hometown of about 10,000 people. In fact, my first instructor had not even yet received his black belt. He was Caucasian, named Terry McMickle, and he was teaching the classes as a red belt. Our master instructor, in fact, back in the day, we didn't even use the term master instructor. So Mr. Insup Song was our teacher, and that's the lineage initially. And he was 2.5 hours north of me in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so it was Mr. Song was my original master instructor, I guess, if you will. And then I continued to train there up until about red belt. And then I had heard about this new master instructor named Mr. J.K. Lee, now Grandmaster J.K. Lee, and trained with him. And basically he became like my second father. So I was a red belt when I started with him in 1976. And then in 1977, August of 77 is when I tested for and was promoted to first degree black belt at age 14. And it's very interesting. I tell my students this often, most contemporary schools of today have very specific curriculum and you know exactly what you have to do at every belt level. And it wasn't that way back then. I mean, we had our pumse. We didn't even call them pumse. That's more of a modern Korean word. We called them hyung, or our forms. And when you go to a test, you knew what your form was and your board breaking, but you had to make up your own one-step sparring technique, your own self-defense techniques. And basically, you really didn't know what was going to happen at testing. And there are parts of my black belt testing I can't even remember because it was a pretty hellacious thing. Grandmaster Lee used to bring in other guest instructors, and there was a man from Elgin, Illinois, named Master I.K. Kim, who was there, and Master Lee would introduce us, and then he would just turn to the guest instructors and say, "Test them." And for those of your listeners that have ever seen the James Bond movie, where there's a character named Oddjob who used to throw his hat as a weapon, that's what Grandmaster Kim looked like. His neck was about this big, and he was a judo and taekwondo master, and was a pretty rough guy. And so, yeah, I made it through the test, but it was rough, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is this amazing thing. We look at like Taekwondo versus the judo player, like especially the Asians, like the Taekwondo guys tend to be a little more slimmer, or average built, but the judo guys they're always short and stocky. They come with a lot of power. You can tell a judo guy has been doing it for a long time. I've been around a few of them. It's like, ah man, I better be faster. Gotta be
That's right.
faster.
That's right. Well, and too, I mean, back in the day, there were no requirements, at least that I was aware of, that made it different for teenagers or youth versus adults. In fact, let's just be honest about it. I was in my class one of the youngest people forever. I mean, when I first started training, I was one of only two kids in the class. We all trained with 20 something men, and then that kid quit. So I was used to training with adults. And when I tested for my black belt at age 14, I was probably big for my age, but I still wasn't a grown man. But like my board breaking, I know your school, sir, has got a real emphasis on board breaking, but I was supposed to break 3 boards with a 4-fist as a 14-year-old. You know, I wouldn't think of actually having one of my students do that today, but that, you know, I guess I
That's not
looked
gonna
old enough
happen.
and he
Oh,
decided that's what I was going to do.
no, that's not gonna happen for like a lot of schools that show emphasize ranking. That's a hard thing to
Oh, it's a
do.
very hard break.
Even for instance here. Oh, we got a comment here. Oh, we got oh, Grandmaster Nick Sambury, one of my buddies from Florida, is actually listening. He's one of the top supporters of this podcast. Actually, he'll be coming up to my tournament next weekend. All right, so now
Excellent.
so that's very interesting. I want to go back to the title. So when did you notice that that people start really using the titles like master, grandmaster? Like you said it was always
Yeah.
missing. When did
I'm
you
gonna
see
have
that
to
transition?
say, from my experience, was not until the 1980s.
Okay.
That's when I really started hearing that. And in fact, I went off to college in 19, I graduated high school in 1981. And I think it was when I was coming back for tournaments. Um, and I was hearing people refer to my instructor as Master Lee at that time. That's when I first started hearing that. It was a little fuzzy up until then. You'd hear it every once and again, but all of a sudden, it just like overnight, it seemed that's what was happening in the 80s. But yeah, it was always Mr. Lee. You know, it's so funny because I'll refer to my Taekwondo instructor as Grandmaster Lee now, and my mom, who knows him well, oh, Mr. Lee, how's Mr. Lee doing? You know, that's just the way that she, you know, would socialize with him.
That's different. I wonder what caused that.
I think what had happened is this as Taekwondo began to proliferate, and particularly when it began to move ITF and WT, now was
Mhm.
WTF at the time. I
Yep.
think the new generation of instructors that were coming from Korea that were much more versed in WTF Taekwondo
Yep.
were using the reference of master. And I think that's where it came about.
So yeah, yeah, Taekwondo or World Taekwondo or World Taekwondo Federation back in the day was
Right.
definitely one of the martial arts that most popular martial arts in the world now, but it's one of the ones that really made almost all the other martial art more popular or became
Right.
chains and dojos or dojangs and every corner of the
Right.
family. Not so
Right.
much Taekwondo, but
Well,
yeah,
I know now through just historical readings that I had started in September of 1973, and the WTF started in, I think, May of that year.
okay,
So, I mean, I was right on the cusp. In fact, all of the Taekwondo that I was learning growing up was ITF based Taekwondo. In fact, when I was an 11-year-old yellow belt, I met General Che Young Hee. And I remember going up for his autograph, and he was sitting in a chair and just thinking, my gosh, this is the father of Taekwondo, and I'm almost as tall as he is as an 11-year-old, because he was a very small man. But
mhm,
yes, all of our Taekwondo. And in fact, I know that my Taekwondo instructor was very well, the way that they were explaining what they were doing, because there was a move for Taekwondo to become an Olympic sport, which it eventually did as a demo sport in 88. They were basically in a lineage that said that they wanted to keep it professional, and that the Olympics were an amateur, but they considered themselves professional and wanted to keep it as a martial art versus a sport. So there was a
okay.
lot of variance that was going on, and a little bit of a rub that was going on in those early days.
Yeah, they're all, you know what? I think there still is. There's obviously a lot of schools that do hybrids now, like your schools or ones that you will see are hybrid of World Taekwondo and International. My master's school is mainly ITF, but a little bit of World because of my association with her. And a little bit of Shotokan. There's definitely a lot of mixed styles
Yeah.
now, which I would almost say the mixed styles are go back to more the traditional days versus the segregation where like World Taekwondo is mainly an Olympic sport But then if you look at the way the Kukiwan's going now, they're kind of going back old school with the new self-defense curriculum.
It is true, right? Well, I think what they're realizing, what the Kukiwan has realized is that if you just focus on sparring, you limit the amount of people that you can really reach through Taekwondo. I mean, I don't know about your school, sir, but I mean, I've heard this statistic, and I think mine is pretty close to this as well. I mean, we would do inter-school tournaments and things, but people that are actually going out on tournament circuits, that's maybe 5 to 10% of your student base max in general. So if you're going to grow and proliferate Taekwondo, you have to do it more than just sparring, right? And so
For
like
sure.
we have a big event. We have a big event here in Colorado Springs. It's a national event for the United States called the Hamadang. And I know they do those in Korea as well. And they're just forms and breaking and performance martial arts.
Yeah, no, I've actually been invited for several years from Kukiwan to go over to Korea to compete in that.
Yeah,
I'm assuming they want me over there for the breaking. They probably
sure.
cross some of my breaking kind of want me to represent Canada most likely. But yeah, no, like, yeah, you definitely gotta have all those other elements. Like, I know like my tournament coming up next weekend. We have like 11, 12 schools, over 140 competitors, which is kind of nice for a small tournament. And we got form, we got point sparring, continuous sparring, flag sparring, self-defense, uh, Taekwondo form, Japanese form, Chinese form, weapons, traditional and non traditional, like musical weapons, all kinds of breaking, and like there's a full spectrum of different students that want to focus on certain things. That's what I love about maybe traditional martial art or maybe the open style martial art that there's so many different things that people can get into, and but again, like Olympic Taekwondo, if you're not a sparer, there's nothing for you.
Right, right.
No. Okay, so now you got your black belt, so you went to first dan, and then now from there, obviously, I know you went off to college and you were like a football star in
Right.
Wisconsin there for a little bit as well. But what did Taekwondo do for you, and martial arts in general? How what did it help you? Was there like, any challenges through that time of like going from being that young kid through to college? Was there stuff that was like, if it weren't for Taekwondo, maybe
Oh.
you wouldn't be able to go through those challenges?
Well, I'll tell you what, first and foremost, and I absolutely 100% believe that I would have never been I went to Northwestern University on a football scholarship. So I grew up in Wisconsin, but I was a Wildcat down in Illinois on a football scholarship. And I can honestly say with all my heart that if it wouldn't have been for my martial arts training, I would have never developed into the athlete that would have been good enough to compete and be at that level. Naturally, I was a good athlete. I wasn't a great athlete. But the things that martial art taught me, balance, flexibility, concentration. I remember I played inside linebacker. For those of you that aren't familiar with American football, we're on defense and we stand behind the defensive line and we have to run, both defending against the run and defending against the pass. And one of the things that limited me in my college experience is I just didn't have the foot speed in terms of running as fast as some of my counterparts. But in a very small area, I was extremely quick. In fact, I remember my linebacker coach once telling me after watching me on film and watching my reaction, he said, if you could play football in a 3-by-3 foot box, you'd be an All-American because as soon as the offensive line would move, I could react because of that. And, I did martial arts. The other thing that was so powerful for me in what martial arts did for me is it helped me develop leadership. And I think I had a natural ability to that, but it really took it to a whole other level. And so, being in difficult situations on the athletic field, off-season training, leading teammates, etc. And then, of course, that was because I was used to doing that in martial arts. I was, helping teach classes at age 14 and had my own program when I was 16 years old in my town that I ran. Being able to teach and lead just became second nature for me. But I would have never had that experience to that degree, I'm convinced, if it hadn't been for martial arts.
Yeah, no, I can definitely vouch for that. Well, it's just in my own personal experience, martial arts definitely has helped me in the business world and personal world. But again, I see all like the young students here, watching them go through just regular classes, but also our leadership classes, and then how they kind of take that to the real world. It gives them an advantage. It gives them
Oh my
almost an
gosh.
unfair advantage over everybody else. That like a lot of other activities in sport, there's some better ones out there, but there's a lot of them that they don't get that opportunity to help
At
lead or
all.
help teach, and they just become followers of the coaches, which is nothing wrong with that. But the ones that truly understand what the coach is thinking, they're the ones that really excel. They understand, what the leaders are trying to get out of them.
Absolutely. Well, 100%. And one of the things that I love the most, and you and I have actually had this conversation on several instances, is being able to develop leaders, right? I think that as martial arts instructors, we obviously want to have technically proficient students. We want them to be able to protect themselves, to be good athletes. We want them to have good respect, and we want them to be good students if we're dealing with youth. But man, if we can develop leaders, that is our magic ticket in
Mhm.
terms of developing a unique selling proposition in our schools. And I can't tell you how many letters of recommendation I've written on behalf of my students going into college. And the feedback that I get constantly is when they have had a leadership role in our martial arts organization, how far that takes them in terms of being accepted to universities. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I don't think that we ever want to have it where we just become a leadership school and not focus on the martial arts. You have to have the balance. But I don't think there's any other sport or activity that can balance those so well because, you know, if you're going to be a leader on the football field, as I was, it's very performance related as well, right? You get recognized because you're performing well on the football field. You can have a student who is an average student athletically in a martial arts setting, but has a knack for teaching and leading and collaborating with others. And they can be extremely successful and maybe not be the best of all athletes. They
Oh,
could
for
be,
sure.
but
Oh,
they
yeah,
don't
for
have to
sure.
be.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, it's the mental side of it that definitely carries through. So now you went through college. Now I know you and I had discussed this previously before, but like you were a school owner for about 17 years, I think you said. But
Yes.
before you started, over school or taking over school, what was the transition between college to running a
So
school? Like what?
as I said, went to Northwestern University, graduated in 1985, and was very, very blessed that Procter and Gamble Distributing Company, which is the top consumer products company in the United States, and I know they're very well established in Canada. They were recruiting at Northwestern University, so it was the week of my last football game, and the offensive line coach, who I didn't play for, I knew him, for the last 4 years. He said, "Hey, what are you doing next Tuesday?" I said, "I don't know, sir. I don't know, coach. I don't. I'm not. Football's done." He goes, "Procter and Gamble wants to talk to you." So I had an interview. That was on a Tuesday. At the end of that interview, the guy said, "Hey, my boss would like to meet you tomorrow." So I had that interview on a Wednesday. And after I got done with that interview, he said, "My boss is in town tomorrow. I'd like you to meet him." So 3 interviews, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Get done with the third interview. They said, "We want to invite you to Cincinnati." And by the first week of December, I had been offered a job. So I started with Procter and Gamble in the beauty care sales division. Think shampoo and deodorant. Um, and I started. It was in the management training program. So I started as a sales rep, calling on the individual grocery stores, drugstores, mass merchandisers, and then was promoted after a year to a management trainee. And then after the year after that, got promoted and was sent out to Southern California, where I spent 4 years as a unit manager, key account manager. I also had people reporting to me. Went on a special assignment in Cincinnati for 2 years. And then after 2.5 years, and then after that experience, came out to Denver, where I'm at now. And I was calling on, I was the key account executive for Albertsons Grocery, which at that time was the third largest grocery chain in the country. And did that for 2 years until I said, "You know what? This is great. I'm having an awesome experience. I love the people I work with and for, but, but, but martial arts is what's in my heart." the turning point for me was doing I was in Boise, Idaho with the top leadership team of Albertsons Groceries. All of our team was doing an annual business review. And I got done giving my portion of it and I sat down. And as soon as I sat down, all I was doing was daydreaming about coming back and teaching a martial art class in Denver later that night. And I thought, I'm not here anymore. I'm someplace else. And so, long story short, I left them, opened up my school family martial arts center in November of 1995.
Yeah, that's something really important. I think a lot of people don't get an opportunity to do is to follow their dream, right? They dream, but but then again, a lot of people don't get the opportunity to find what they're passionate about either, though. Like some of us are lucky where we discovered it early on. Some people unfortunately don't get to see it, ever get to experience that passion. Some people later on in life, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm too old," or whatever. But what do you think? What was it that you think? Was it the football? Was it the leadership? What got you that job though? Like really, like what was it you think that got those people so interested in you that you got 3 interviews in 3 days? What was it? What was that
Well,
magical thing?
I'll tell you what, I say this with humility, and again, I have to bring it back to martial arts because I had in high school, had been teaching and training martial arts all the way through high school. Like I said, I was 16 years old and had my own, the community center program that I had started in, I took over at age 16. And so I did that on my own. So I was teaching adults, but I was the head instructor at 16 years old. Um, and and during that time, I was also chosen for a number of leadership awards in high school. I was the runner-up in the state of Wisconsin for the Hugh O'Brien Leadership Award. I was chosen the next year as a Boys Nation senator, representing I was two young men of 1,500 in the state of Wisconsin that was up for this, and I was chosen as a representative. So I had that leadership experience, but all of it came, Jonathan, as a result of my martial art training because it's who I was, but I learned in martial arts how to express in even a more profound way because of martial arts. And I think there was a uniqueness to it as well. I think that people recognized, you got to remember, nowadays you could have a high number of kids in a classroom that have their black belt, right? Because martial arts is so proliferated at this point. Back in the day, I was like a unicorn, right? Someone that had his black belt in high school. This was like a wild thing. So, but again, it was all because of that. And so I had these leadership opportunities that I was seen for and recognized for. And so it just continued to grow. And I mean, I was the natural leader on a football team and it just started to develop that way. But again, I have to thank martial arts for that.
Yeah, no, actually, no, I even see that now, like with my students, when like people like hear about people having a black belt, and they'll instantly they recognize the self discipline, they recognize the respect, they understand instantly recognize how the hard work pays off to get to that. Like people, even from my experience, have a lot of respect for people that go through the martial arts. I definitely see that as people see that as an advantage, and those kids or even those adults definitely kind of they get pushed a little bit easier, or they get into these opportunities a little bit easier than people that vote for sure. But now,
Well, if I may, I just make one comment just to put this in perspective. Now having a younger person or having their black belt is not uncommon, right?
mhm,
You'll have kids 10, 12 years old that earn their POOM, their junior black belt. Well, that, at least in the United States, and I think Canada is probably similar to that, that possibility didn't really happen until the release of the first Karate Kid movie in 1980, 1981, right? When all the kids started now coming to the martial arts schools. So many martial arts schools now, at least here in the States, there's 70, 80% children, right?
mhm.
Back in the day, before the Karate Kid movies, it was almost completely flipped. So think about that being the phenomenon. And I would receive my black belt, 3-4 years before that. So that's where there was a really unique element to me being a black belt as a teenager.
For sure, for sure. Okay, now moving on to you're opening your school.
Yeah.
So I took over my school for my original instructor, so I already kind of had a little bit of a student base. But did you start out like flat zero students, or did how did you build up the school, and what did you find were some of the challenges along the way?
Mhm.
And
Mhm. Well, yeah, I think it's somewhat of a unique story. So I have two sons, and they were at the time they would have been 9 and 5 years old. And so I started teaching first. This was my idea. I didn't want to just go and open up a commercial location without any students whatsoever, knowing that it would take a while to build. So I started teaching martial arts at their grade school 3 nights a week. So I worked it out with the school. They leased me their gym. And in April of 1995, I started teaching. And my original plan was to do that for a year before I maybe even thought of opening up a school professionally. But one of the moms of one of my students said she was a real estate agent. And she said, "Hey, this is in April of 95. She said, if you've got this goal to do this within a year, you need to start looking for real estate now because it can take a while." I'm like, okay. So we start looking. Well, that was April of 95. By July of 95, I had signed a lease, or August, I had signed a lease. And by November of 95, I was opening up my school. What that did, though, is it allowed me those months, those 6 months prior, I got up to around 50 students. So when I opened up my doors, I already had 50 students that were there that covered basically all my costs. Wasn't paying myself yet, but I was able to handle all my costs. And then from those 40, 50 students within a year, very, very blessed, I was up to 200 students. And so now all of a sudden he was like instantly, I was like, I'm totally on purpose here. This is going so well. Stayed at around that 200 level for the next couple of years because I was doing it all myself. And I hadn't developed staff and instructors and whatever. But then I started doing that. And at the end of 5 years, I was at a little over 500 students at one location.
hey, so then yeah, not to say, I know when I took school here, we were only at around 50. Like, we used to be a pretty good school before some instructors split from my original instructor and took them all. We were kind of going downhill, and I was lucky enough over the years to bring it up quite a bit.
Well, it was a good
Now,
time to buy it. It was a good time to buy it. You probably got a good price if it was declining, right?
yeah, I'll tell you off air when I think
Okay, all
for it.
right, good,
It's
good.
ridiculous how much actually. Actually, with the amount of money the money that they were paying me to teach, I just took that money and bought the school, so it was almost virtually free. We look at it
Nice.
in that way.
Nice.
But so now, while you were running your school, there was something that you had a little bit of unfinished business that you and I have discussed before. There was something that you needed to do before you try and take your school to the next level. You can go ahead and discuss that a little bit.
Are you referring to my competitive career?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I had done very well in the Taekwondo circuit, and I took those 4 years off when I went to college and was playing football. And then my senior year of college, I got back into Taekwondo sparring, and this is 1986, so this is 2 years out from the Olympics and whatever. And so the fervor was going on, and I re-engaged. I was in the Colorado State Taekwondo Championships. Took second in the heavyweight division that year. My loss, which I won't get into, I think it still bothers me, but that man, he's continued to be a friend with me throughout the years, Parasamani, but he went on to become a 3-time national U.S. champion. So, and he and I were neck and neck at that time, but that's okay. So anyway, then I go off with P&G. My son is born. My first son is born, let's see, just a couple of weeks after I started with P&G. So all of a sudden, I'm sorry, a couple of weeks before I started with them. So I'm instantly fatherhood, married, and have this job. So I was training in martial arts, but nowhere close to what I wanted to do, if I had to compete. I just wasn't able to do it. So back in 1997, 1998, the USTU, United States Taekwondo Union, came out with a expanded version of divisions, one being 33 to 40. And I'm like, well, at the time I was like 34, 35. I'm like, I keep myself in really good shape. I think I could do that. And I was running the school at the same time. So was training 6 days a week as best as I could in terms of really getting in great shape, running my school, had my family. Went in 1998 and really actually fought well in my first 3 fights, and then got in the finals. And to this day, still don't know what happened. Well, I kind of do, but I took silver in 98. And I was like, man, I came this far, and I thought maybe I'm done. Well, the next year I decided to go at it again. And that's when I went to the USTU Nationals in Daytona Beach, Florida, I believe is where it was, and won the division that year. And as soon as they raised my hand and I won the gold medal match, I looked up at the heavens and I said, thank you. And then I knew my competitive career was done. I just knew I had, that was my goal. I really wanted to grow my school, and that was really my focus. But yeah, and it was a great experience. It helped me fulfill a dream that I'd had for my whole life. And but I was also glad when it was done.
Yeah, no, like I said, you and I have discussed, like, I'm kind of in that right now. That stage right now where I want that one last world championship and that one division, and it's like,
Right.
it's been so close, like, second place, third place, fourth place, second place, third, second, like, come on, right? I just want that one last one, and then be like, I'm done, and again, do what you did, let's focus more on school. So, I'm
Well,
hoping.
and it was, when I did it, it was great for me. It was a great, the school got behind me. So my students knew I was training, competing. It was great to come back, show them the gold medal. And of course I use it in my marketing even still today when I speak. So I'll always have that. But in terms of the lifestyle that I wanted to have and the ability to impact people the way that I wanted to, doing training at that level it was like consuming for me. I mean,
Mm,
and then being able to teach at night. And I realized that in order to balance those 3 plates, my family, my business, and my training, it was really difficult to do that. It was difficult enough to balance family and my school, much less, the heavy training I was doing. So I was complete with it. And, I still daydream, I guess now it's 25 years since I won that title. And, you know, like Bill Wallace always says, the older you get, the better you were. So, I
mm.
think about it. In fact, I was actually thinking about it this morning when I'm on my morning walk, but it was so great to do it, and it's done. And it was time to move on.
Oh, for sure, yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I want that one last one. I kind of want. You want it to be done, but you always like
Sure.
wanna do it again. But at the same time, you said balance wise, to be like an elite level athlete slash run school, and if you have a family on top of that,
Yeah.
there's sacrifice. Right? Some areas are gonna sacrifice, and if you can eliminate one of those areas, meaning the competitive side, and use that competitive energy and put it towards the family and put it towards the school, then that would definitely benefit people a lot better. I think for sure. Now you and I have a mutual friend. Well, how we actually met, and you just mentioned his name, Grandmaster Bill Wallace, who's Superfoot for most people that know him. Tell us how you met Bill Wallace and how did you start training in his system?
Sure. So my origin story with Bill Wallace actually starts long before I ever met him. He won his world championship in September of 1974. And see, one thing I always want to, I always like to tell our younger listeners is that, back in the day, we didn't have YouTube. So our heroes, if they weren't on television, we didn't get to see them live at all. I mean, the way that I learned about Bill Wallace was through martial art magazines. And
Mhm.
I just was always felt compelled, and I was like a little boy looking at my hero in the magazines. So one night I'm babysitting the next door neighbor, and my mom calls me up and says, hey, there's this world karate championship that's on. You might want to watch it. So I turn it on and there's Bill Wallace. And he is, and I think many would argue, he was the star of the show. I mean, it was the first time that they had ever done full contact karate. The fighting was maybe a little sloppy, except for him, man. His leg was unbelievable. And I remember as an 11-year-old boy saying, one day I want to kick just like him. And so anyway, this like love affair from a distance had gone on for several years, for probably about 10 years, I guess. And now I've graduated college and I'm working for P&G. And one of my friends, who was actually my counselor when I was a Boys Nation person in Wisconsin, I had done a martial arts demonstration for the 1,500 kid guys. And that's how I got to be well known. And he was so inspired by it, he started training in martial arts, my friend Jim. And so he calls me up. He's living in central Wisconsin at the time. And he says, I'm in Chicago. And he says, hey, Bill Wallace is coming in a couple of weeks. You got to come up there. So I made the trek up with my wife at the time and our newborn son, who was a year old, and met Bill Wallace, met him for the first time. And during the course of the seminar, I mean, I had done everything imaginable to copy his style. So I was working all the flexibility kicking, and I think he noticed that I had that. So he tapped me and I was his partner for the entire seminar. So we get done with the seminar and we take a picture together and he goes, hey, we're going out for dinner after this. Come join us. Are you kidding me? Yes. So we hit it off really well. And so then I kept in contact with him. And then 3 years after that, I started going to karate college in Radford, Virginia. So this would have been probably in the early 90s. And so that's where I really got to connect with him, because we were supposed to change and train with all these different instructors. I just would stay with him for the entire weekend. So from Thursday to Sunday, I would train in 8 of his, classes that were all like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And he took me under his wing. I became known as his protege, started teaching at karate college then, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and I alluded to earlier, that's how you and I know each other was a few years back. Somehow I came across the Superfoot System online and got a hold of you, and it's almost the same thing, right? Like, I remember when I did my first degree with him, and I was in the testing room, and everybody else was out and about, and he just came in and he just beelined, and he just somehow knows me and beelines me, start talking, and kind of the same thing. Like, you and I have very similar background. I was adding a Superfoot System, but we have that testing ability, we have that flexibility. And I think Bill really appreciates the people that kind of have that Taekwondo background that are figures, right? And then that also put the effort into actually becoming flexible and, being able to control their feet. A lot of people, we see a lot of people come that don't necessarily have that same dedication towards kicking that we do, for sure. But then now moving forward from there, obviously you spent many years training with him, and then now you're the director of testing and the director of business development.
That is correct. Yeah. So I was one of the very, very first schools to ever join the Superfoot system back in 2000.
Okay.
And so that was the first. Paul Acklin was part of that when he was the head coach school at the time, because that's Bill Wallace was living in Tampa, and I'm probably one of the first 3 to 5 schools in the whole organization. And we always had this vision for what we wanted to do, and for many years it survived, but it wasn't really getting the traction that we wanted. And probably back about 4 or 5 years ago, Paul Acklin, Jim Ginter, Terry Dow, and myself kind of went to Grandmaster Wallace and said, hey, we've got this vision for what this could really be. And he's like, go for it. And so we basically have taken it over. As you said, I'm the director of business development. Jim Ginter heads up marketing and technology. Terry Dow is technical director. Paul Acklin is director of operations. And so what we've done is we've created in the Superfoot system a program that, and I know this is how you use it as well, this is how I used it, you can take the Superfoot methodologies and basically overlay it onto your already existing program. So we're not really in the business of saying you need to become a Superfoot school and that's all you do. If you're Taekwondo, if you're a Kempo, if you're a Shotokan, whatever, take the principles and the curriculum that we've developed and use it in your school. So we now have a black belt testing program. We have an instructor certification program. And I'm happy to say that Jonathan was the very first Superfoot instructor to graduate from the instructor certification program worldwide. So congratulations to you for that, sir. And and so we're doing many, many things in that regard. We want to be able to allow Bill Wallace's legacy stay alive. So he's 78 years old. He's still doing seminars all around the world, still in the full splits, can still kick in the head. So we wanted to make sure that we had a legacy developed. So now we have programs where people can become affiliate schools, certified training centers like Cobourg Taekwondo is, and really utilize the Superfoot method in a way that can really help them advance their schools and their businesses.
Yeah, and it's amazing how seamless you can take the Superfoot system, and then at least from Taekwondo, at least in Taekwondo, it adds the punching and kicking aspect, or how to set up the kick with the punches from a sideways stance, which typically Olympic Taekwondo tends to be. One second, I'm on a podcaster. I'm on a podcast right now.
Oh, okay. I just want to tell you, I went to service candidate up there, and they checked my thing, and my license is active.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Yeah, sorry about that, guy. You never know when you're on my podcast, people come in the office. But yeah, but well, saying about like the Superfoot system, like it's a kickboxing system, but it's more of a sideways stance based on the injuries of Bill Wallace and how he's going to use his left leg to kick and protect his right leg. But from a Taekwondo, like most Taekwondo fighters, we tend to stand sideways anyway. But we're not really well diverse in how to punch unless we do more of a traditional boxing. But now when you take the sideways boxing stance, or the Superfoot stance, as we call it, it really allows the Taekwondo guy to now mix it up with people that can punch and kick. But being a Taekwondo guy, we now have more advantage of the kicking. And that's the beauty of the system. And like what we use it for is primarily our sparring system. We take the punching, which allows us to set up the Superfoot kicking, but also lets us set up the Taekwondo style kicking as well. And it's like I'm glad I found it. It's one of those things where like I instantly touched it. I'm like, wow. So we were doing like Taekwondo, and I'm gonna say traditional kickboxing or K1, where you're more like a fall. And once you start looking at the whole of that, and you're really considering, you're like, oh my god, really? Like really? But
well, and you kind of spoke to it too, because principally the Superfoot system utilizes the 3 forward leg kicks of the side, the round, and the hook kick, right? But principally, you can take that into a rear leg roundhouse kick, an axe kick, a turning back kick, a spin hook kick. The principles are the same. Universal chambering, utilizing the hands and the feet together. So yeah, in fact, that used to be when I would teach at camps with Bill Wallace. He would do the Superfoot system, of course, forward leg kicking, and then he would have me do same Superfoot principles with rear leg kicking of Taekwondo. So that's how.
That's the beauty of it. Sometimes certain styles, they're so dogmatic that their concept or their strategies or even just technique is the only way to do it. Or Bill Wallace is like, take what works. Well, how do you say that? He always said,
take what works for you and change it, or change it to make it work for you. Yeah.
Play with it, modify it, exactly. And that's what that system allows you. So it's like it's almost more important to understand the principles and concepts than
I would agree.
Themselves. That's how I've always taught, and I'm always telling people it's more important. Yeah, you gotta have good technique. You need to have good technique, but if you understand the principles and concepts, it will take you so much further. And I'm like this, like it's like seeing the Matrix. It really is. And I
Yeah,
have young
100%.
students that once they see the matrix, oh my god. Now I want to move forward a little bit more though, because I want to make sure there's a little more emphasis on you. Now, besides the okay, so then you already moved on from teaching martial arts full time. You kind of oversee some school, but
Correct.
you also are well known, especially in North America, in the United States, as like a motivational speaker, a trainer of leaders. Can you kind of get into a little bit of how you kind of decided to move into that area of your current career and maybe some of the clients you have worked with and maybe some of the services that you could potentially offer either under
Mhm.
martial arts school or just people in general, really.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking. Well, it was really a natural progression how I got to this place. So, martial arts for me, I think from a very early age, was a vehicle in personal development. And I couldn't, when I was young, I probably didn't know how to articulate it. But even my original Taekwondo instructor would often talk about the purpose of martial art training was to become a life champion, right? And so, yes, you can have success in the ring, and I did, and you did, and all that kind of stuff. But how do you take that long term? So it really became that was the way that I was teaching, and I think that's one of the reasons that my school was thriving when it was at its highest, is because we had that integration. Now, when you are using that as your unique selling proposition, you also have to be growing yourself. So one of the things is, and I think that many school owners, if you're not consciously aware of it, when I say this, I think you will understand it. I always like to say when I speak, when I'm out speaking, and particularly if I'm speaking to entrepreneurs, not just martial arts school owners, but entrepreneurs in general, is being an entrepreneur or a business owner is the number one personal development workshop in the world, right? Because you can't hide, you have to get things done, and you have to look at yourself, because you might, if you're in the business of blaming other people, it's not going to go very far. And if you're having difficulty, you'll realize there's one common denominator, and it's you or it's me, right? So we always have to be on the cusp of developing as human beings. So there was that aspect that I was going through when I opened my school. The other thing is the way that I promoted my school, Jonathan, is when I opened up my school, I had 6 competitors in a 2-mile radius of me, martial arts schools that already were established. And I started looking and saying, okay, how can I differentiate myself between those other schools? Because at that time, we didn't have the internet for marketing, right? So you had yellow pages and local newspapers, whatever. And I'm like, how do I differentiate myself? Well, I can clearly differentiate myself in the product that we have. So there was a feel that I wanted to have in a school that was very, very positive, very welcoming, very high positive energy. And so we accomplished that. But how do I get out and recruit new students? What I decided to do was do it in elementary schools. So I became a preferred speaker in all the elementary schools in my area in talks on nonviolent conflict resolution and bully proofing. So I wasn't necessarily, I was using martial art principles, but when I would go in and see a school, I wasn't teaching them to kick and punch. I was teaching them to use their words to de-escalate. I taught them some blocking maneuvers and some footwork maneuvers. And so I started having schools call me to come in. And when we were at our very top of the game, I would go in and see an entire elementary school, each class, all the first graders, all the second graders, all the kindergartners. I'd see them for 40-minute periods. And at the end, I had 600, 700 kids that I had seen. And then they would allow me to bring my demonstration team in the afternoon for a full school assembly where I would continue with the positive, things that I was talking about. And it just helped our school explode. Well, I started to realize that I'm a pretty good speaker. So how can I take that to another level? How can I take the principles of martial arts, of black belt leadership, of the mind of a champion, I call it, and how can I take those principles and take them out to the masses? How can I do with organizations? How can I do with youth? How can I do with business owners? Because I had the background in corporate, and that's basically how this all came about. And so again, martial arts, I'm so grateful for it because that was my petri dish, if you will. That's where I got to experiment with things and then continue to develop. And now I do that through keynote speaking. I have various talks that I give on black belt leadership through the mind of a champion. I do a board breaking experience corporately where I go in and I help people identify the limiting beliefs that are holding them back, the breakthroughs they want to have occur. They write it on either side of the board, and I teach them how to break it as a physical manifestation of their breakthrough. And then I also do life leadership coaching for both personal development and also business. So that's kind of how I got into it. And it was, again, a natural evolution. And I'm still very active in our martial arts organization here in Denver. In fact, I'll be teaching a seminar tomorrow and still oversee black belt testings and whatever. But this allows me to grow and expand in ways and get my message out in a way that's beyond what I was able to do when I ran my martial arts school.
For sure. And then if anybody that wants to experience some of the stuff you do, want to get a hold of you for your services, or even to find a couple of you authors, 2 books, which I have. One of them here, I think, on my desk. If not, somewhere else.
You mean these 2 books, Jonathan? You mean these 2 books right here?
This one there's one of them. The other one's at home. Yeah, so those. I mean, I'm currently reading this one right now. But yeah, no, you're a phenomenal author. You know, people, even if you're not like in martial arts, people can take these for non-martial artists and use the principles, and then it's kind of like an intro into like your services, like your mentorship program that you and I are currently going through right now. But like, yeah, if people are interested, they can go ahead and see you at chrisnatzke.com, which I highly recommend. They can see you do some like YouTube, put some videos on YouTube. You're always putting stuff on Facebook as well. You're always giving out. Like you give out a lot more than probably what you receive back. But that's kind of like what we do, though, right? Like for every I'm not saying I'm just gonna put it in dollar value. For every dollar that somebody gives us, we give $100 of value back, right? And that's the only way I can really think of saying it at the moment. But yeah, like
Well, I appreciate that, Jonathan. I think that, you know, the leader, I have been incredibly blessed in my whole life, the mentors, the teachers, the instructors that I've had in my life. You know, clearly Grandmaster Lee and Bill Wallace have been incredible influences in my life. And I always think that a life worth living is one where we're giving back, we're being of service, right? And so anyway, and one of the things I just thought of is if people do go to my website, and I see you have it there, I appreciate that, is if they want to enroll, I have a weekly blog and Facebook Live that I do called the Mind of the Champion Tip of the Week. And so if you want to, you know, sign up for that we get on my mailing list and find out what's going on, I would love to have you join us.
Yeah, like I said, just me personally speaking, like when you and I talk on a weekly basis, and it's very conversational, but it's also very powerful in the way that there's really no agenda on your end. You just kind of pull everything out of me, which I think is really powerful. That a lot of stuff is coming from within your client. You're always talking about the breakthrough, right?
Right.
Like that's one of your main messages. And you and I have had a few breakthroughs already, and we're going to continue for the next little bit. But again, what you do is powerful. And I think you and I have a responsibility. You and I have both had some phenomenal mentors in the martial arts, the non-martial arts world, and it's almost like our responsibility to take that knowledge and wisdom and help other people and share it, right? And it's actually the lineage, like we talked about martial art. Lineage is really important in martial arts, but it's also important in other areas that you kind of pass that on. We really want to, like you and I want to make the world better. When we leave this world, we want to produce thousands and thousands of leaders that can help, you know, make the next generation better for this world, right? And I want to thank you very much for being on this podcast. I think this was a really good hour, a lot of powerful information that you shared with everybody, and I want to thank you for that.
Thanks, my friend. It was absolutely my honor. And I want to acknowledge you because, you know, most great instructors are great students. And in the work that you and I have done together, you're a kind of man that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, and you're not afraid of getting out of a comfort zone. And it's been such a great time working with you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
All right, you too.